I'm Michael Eamon, chair of the Collegiate Way and principal of Catherine Parr Trail at Trent University. And it's so great to see so many familiar faces and some new ones as well. And so great for us to have the 4th Collegiate Way International Conference here at Trent University, and our first Collegiate Way International Conference hosted online. So welcome to being here. In a few moments, I'll call upon Marilyn Burns, our Vice President of Enrollment Communication and Colleges, to say an official welcome. But before that, I want to just say how grateful I am. First of all, I'm grateful to be here at Trent University, which is situated on the treaty and traditional lands of the Mississauga-Anishinaabe. And I would like to express my deep gratitude for the Anishinaabe and their teachings about and their care for this land in this part of Canada where we are. Trail College, my college where I'm sitting in particular, is adjacent to the Otonabee River. And in Anishinaabe the language of the Anishinaabe, the Otonabee means the river that beats like a heart. And so we're right beside this portage because, of course, going across the river was not in the cards for thousands of years. And so for time out of memory, this portage circumvented these swift waters and provided an important avenue of exchange of commodities and of ideas here near where we are in Trail College. And so it is in this spirit I want to continue today that conversation, the idea of the exchange of ideas today and for the next 3 days. Now, most of us where we are right now are situated on Indigenous territories, and I want to also acknowledge the respective traditions and teachings of First Peoples and ask for peace, reconciliation, and understanding for us all. I said I was grateful today, and I'm also very grateful for the assistance of all the colleges here at Trent University in helping to put on this conference, and particularly the staff at Catherine Parr Trail College for all their work and their continuing efforts behind the scenes as we do this Zoom WOVA, I'm not sure how it's pronounced, conference online. Finally, I'm grateful to be with you for the next 3 days because you're wonderful people and we share a lot in common. But perhaps one of the biggest things that we share in common is this fundamental belief, a fundamental belief that higher education, and particularly a collegiate education, improves people and can improve ourselves. And when we are better through education, then we can go out and make the lives of others better. And that's why I'm so happy to be with you today. And as we all know, the Collegiate Way is one of scholarship, of community, and humility, but of course, fun. And so I hope all of you have a very enjoyable 3 days together as we, explore different aspects, as we commiserate, as we celebrate, as we think about COVID and how it has affected the Academy and the Collegiate Academy, but also look at our best practices and, as I say, share a fellowship together online. As many of you know, of course, Trent University was not supposed to be the host of the next Collegiate Way conference. In January 2019, we all met at Rice University in Houston, and that was a great time. And I want to thank again our indefatigable local organizers, John and Paula Hutchinson, who couldn't be here today, but for all the work they did at that wonderful conference at Rice. And at that time, we decided perhaps we should head off to New Zealand for the next conference. And then a little pandemic kind of happened and put a little bit of a wrench into the plans. So fate had other plans for us, but in the interim, we decided it's so important to continue the momentum that we had at Rice, and that's why we're meeting today online. And I'm so excited that we can be doing that. As I said, I'm going to introduce Marilyn Burns in a few minutes, but I just wanted to go over a couple housekeeping rules and less rules, more suggestions for the next 3 days. First of all, our papers and events will entirely be on Zoom, and we'll be recording all of these sessions and be providing an edited version of this to our participants later. So if you are in a different time zone, I appreciate that, I respect that. Eastern Daylight Savings Time is hard enough for us who live in it, and it's exceedingly hard for everyone, in Macau and Singapore and, Australia and New Zealand. So I appreciate your patience here, and we will be recording this. In an effort to make this virtual conference as real as possible, I would ask you to leave your cameras on as much as possible. Now, of course, I understand there are bandwidth issues, or there's other issues you may want to, like Carl, grab a snack or something like that, and that's totally all right to turn off your cameras. But if we can keep it on as much as possible, especially when we're talking, that'd be wonderful to try to emulate that feel of us being together. Each panel and session will have one of my colleagues as a moderator on it. And if you haven't, no, I don't need that. I was saying, if you haven't submitted your biographical information, please do so. But I think everyone has now. So, I'd like to say a little bit more about these sessions. To help avoid Zoom fatigue, we've designed the conference sessions with both shorter papers and some longer panel presentations, as you've seen on the schedule. I'd like to ask our presenters once again to keep their papers to around 15 minutes. And this again is to limit Zoom fatigue, because what we really want to do is have rich discussions. And if perhaps something was missed in the paper, we can catch up on it in the discussions as well. As I mentioned before, each one of these sessions will have a moderator, and they're my colleagues. So I'd like to introduce very briefly my colleagues right now. We have Principals Melanie Buttle and Christine Freeman-Roth. If you want to just do a quick wave, Christine and Melanie. We also have as moderators Collegiate Way International members who you may remember, such as Principal Tina Fridgen, who was last seen at Rice University. Tina, wave. And our newly appointed interim principal, Jessica Becking, who is our webmaster and newsletter editor for Collegiate Way International, and as well as senior tutor or academic advisor Melanie Sedge, who's been a stalwart since 2014. I'd also like to take this opportunity to introduce Cassie Mathey and Ty Kramer. They are our student conference facilitators. If you want to wave Cassie and Ty again. If there are any issues during your panel, before your panel, just anything with Zoom or the WOVA platform, however it's pronounced, just feel free to send them an email and they can help you out, or chat on the Zoom. Again, all these sessions are on good old Zoom, which we should all know how to use by now. But it is this WOVA platform that we're using, and it does weird things like post pictures and have contests and let's have fun together along the side. So I would encourage you to get the points that it offers, because we have a showroom full of fabulous prizes, which I can't show you right now because it doesn't have a so we have a room, not a showroom. We have a room full of fabulous prizes, which I can't show you, but they have been donated by all the colleges at Trent. So please submit photos and play the games often and early, and we will be giving out prizes at the end of the conference, mailing them to your home address, and we'll also give out some random door prizes and things like that, trying to emulate at least some of the fun that we would have in person. I have an inner Oprah, so I really do want to give out prizes, and it's like you get a scarf and you get a prize and you get a so I hope that we can have fun doing that with the conference as well. Oh yeah, we are on Zoom. I think I mentioned that before. The Zoom link works through the entire conference, so feel free to click in or click out, or just leave it running for the whole time. We're on the same link, and that includes the virtual get-together today at 4 o'clock and the business meeting tomorrow at 4 o'clock for the Collegiate Way International. And everyone is invited to both the virtual get-together tonight and this afternoon and to the business meeting. Well, that's it for housekeeping things. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our very special guest today. Marilyn Burns is the Vice President of Communications and Enrollment at Trent University, which is a huge portfolio that oversees the institution's image and reputation, its recruitment and its admissions, and of course, the university's 5 colleges. A graduate of Trent University twice over, Marilyn Burns holds a master's in the Department of English Literature's Public Text program. Her scholarly interests include semiotics and the role of words and imagery in our lives. Trent, its colleges and the surrounding community have provided fertile ground for these academic and professional pursuits, as well as Marilyn's hobbies as an avid curler, kayaker, and a musician. She has a band, so it's totally legit, folks. In her band, Canadian Penny, which I'm sure she'll explain at a later date why it's called Canadian Penny. In her band, Canadian Penny, she sings and plays fiddle, accordion, and piano. But Marilyn is also an active member of our larger community. She's volunteered and chaired many things, including she was chair of the board for the Peterborough AIDS Resource Network. In her 20 years at the university, Marilyn has had a role in and relationship with each and every one of Trent's colleges, and she holds all of them near and dear to her heart. And she almost never plays favorites with us. So Marilyn is delighted to provide the opening remarks for our 2022 Collegiate Way online conference here at Trent University. It is my pleasure to introduce Marilyn Burns.
Thank you so much, Michael. What a kind introduction, and thank you. I will explain maybe at the social later a little bit about Canadian Penny and why we have that name, but perhaps you can use your imagination and see if you're on the mark later. So I wanted to begin by thanking Michael. You know, your leadership of the Collegiate Way International, Michael, is obviously legendary with you here in your third term as chair and hosting this virtual conference at Trent. It's really a reflection of your deep knowledge and commitment to the Collegiate Way. And I know that at Trent, we do continue to benefit from your profound understanding of our own origins as a collegiate university and of the international landscape of university colleges the world over. So thanks for all you do. Well, hello, Anin, bonjour, hello, bonjour, g'day, and Kira ora. It really is a pleasure to welcome all of you here today from 20 institutions representing 7 countries around the world to the Collegiate Way Conference 2022. Collegiate Universities in a Changing World is a theme apropos of where we find ourselves as we emerge from a global pandemic and work with our collegiate systems to do what we can in the face of international conflict and contribute solutions to an increasingly complicated and unsettled world. More and more, I think we are all recognizing that we are a global village, and I cannot imagine a better way for students to learn this than at a collegiate university. These are times when strong leadership is more important than ever at our institutions to provide considered, nuanced responses to our common challenges. Now, I know there are many luminaries from the world of collegiate education at this week's conference, but I would like to acknowledge a few in particular. All of the members of the Collegiate Way International Advisory Board, specifically Martin Evans, retired head of Trevelyan College, Durham, and co-founder of Collegiate Way International. Welcome, Martin. Jeremy Cook, Pro Vice Chancellor of Colleges and Student Experience, Durham University, and I understand you are like my counterpart there, Jeremy. Wayne Erickson, President of University Colleges Australia, and Barbara Green, immediate past president of University Colleges Australia. And finally, Carl Krieger, who I think is having his lunch, co-chair, Residential College Society of America. Thank you all for being here and for your leadership that you've shown in building awareness of the excellence that university colleges inspire. So would that we were all together today here in person for this meeting of the collegiate minds. These events, when they're in person, I think really mirror in many ways the advantages of the collegiate university as they mix the academic with the administrative, the spatial with the intellectual and the experiential, and all of these with a little bit of social. But let's face it, a lot of social if we were together in person. So given that we are not in person and that many of you from a farther afield may right now be pondering whether or not the snow has even melted yet out here in the Great White North, I would not be doing my job if I didn't give you a sense of what you're missing here at Trent University this spring. So with that, we will cue a video for you.
Everyone see the video?
If you hit before you hit play, if you touch the right there, that will be good. As you can see, if we were in person, we would have met in some of those halls, and that particular award-winning brutalist architecture of Trent University. We were born of a master plan that not only anticipated the colleges, but was literally designed on the twin foundations of small group teaching and the collegiate system. So if we were in person, I think we also would have dined in the Great Hall at Champlain College, where sweeping views of the Otonabee may treat you to the sight of a majestic bald eagle, for instance. We would have taken you out for a night on the town in Peterborough, a vibrant small university city whose sense of community and desire to educate its own youth gave birth to Trent as a collegiate university. Finally, we would have introduced you to what is arguably the greatest wealth of Canada, our water, in the form of the Otonabee River that you saw in the video that runs right through our 1,400-acre campus. A former Prime Minister of Canada said, "Travel 1,000 miles in a train and you're a brute. Pedal 500 and you remain basically a bourgeois. Paddle 100 in a canoe and you are already a child of nature." So were you here, we would have taught you to paddle a canoe on the Otonabee River. By the way, that same Prime Minister also famously said that a Canadian is someone who knows how to make love in a canoe. But we do draw the line at just how much the Collegiate Way can furnish all experiences. Despite the fact that we are clearly online and not in person, we are equally happy to welcome you here at Trent. I think Michael and maybe the video have introduced our 5 colleges and their principals, but I will mention them again here. We have Catherine Parr Trail College, Champlain College, Lady Eaton College, Otonabee College, and Peter Zofsky College. And I wanted to mention in particular the people who I often call unicorns for the vast array of gifts and skills that they bring to their work each day and night and weekend, as the case may be. You all know Dr. Michael Lehman, the principal of Trail College, and I hope you will get to know Dr. Melanie Buttle, Dr. Christine Freeman Roth, of Lady Eaton College, and Melanie is at Zofsky, Jessica Becking at Otonabee College, and Principal Tina Fridgen of Champlain College. Overseeing the colleges at Trent, I have become more and more convinced that Trent's ranking as the province's #1 undergraduate university for 11 years in a row and #3 in all of Canada is built on the uniqueness of our college system and the distinctly committed teams that these 5 principals lead, the experiences that they create. So my deepest thanks to them for all that they do. As I prepared my remarks today, of course, I reflected on the title of the conference, Collegiate Communities in a Changing World, and the common issues that we face, the struggle to promote personal connection in a digital age, the effort to advance humanism in the face of commercialism, the goal to build wisdom in future leaders and our students as they encounter profound hurdles with mental health, the imperative to convey humor, empathy, and vulnerability in a way that manages risk. I hope that doesn't sound too dire because, in fact, I think we are up for these challenges as collegiate universities, exactly because of the diversity that we bring to our institutions. That a distinctly personal collegiate experience is just the answer to these perplexing problems. To paraphrase Malcolm Gladwell, when we pursue universal principles, we do ourselves a disservice. In embracing the diversity of human beings, we will find a surer way to happiness. If you have not watched Malcolm Gladwell's talk on choice, happiness, and spaghetti sauce, I highly recommend it. Not once in the 18-minute and 15-second video does he mention university colleges, but as people who live, study, work, and teach in collegiate universities, you will be able to think of nothing other than colleges as you watch it. Because what Gladwell shares and reinforces for us is the beauty in diversity, the opportunity in choice, and that there is no perfect single approach, product, or experience. I'm sure that we share the belief that the collegiate experience and collegiate universities bring this elegant concept to life every day. I see it at Trent, the idea that students benefit not from a distant monoculture, but rather from a responsive environment where personal touches matter in the architecture and the traditions, and in people who see them as individuals, understand their interests and goals, and view them for their own unique potential. As a product of a collegiate university myself, I grew into my various roles at Trent, and I was actually hatched as a president, vice president at the most interesting of times, July 2020, in the midst of the pandemic. Here, I saw the potential of the colleges unfold with complete diversity and remarkable individual flair. Where one college reached students through visits to the resident alpacas on campus, another college launched snowshoe winter walks, and still another a virtual pottery night. When one had academic advising in person, another offered academic skills online, and so on. Did they collaborate? Yes, widely, and with each other, and with all of their library, housing, student affairs, and faculty partners. But they did so by owning their individuality and their distinct relationships with their fellows, students, alumni, and community members. Was it perfectly packaged and uniformly delivered? No, but I really think this seems to be part of the magic. So I was sold. And I had one of those rare moments in one's career where we say to ourselves, pinch me, is this really my job? And you know exactly what comes after a moment like that, right? Reality. And in this final few minutes of my remarks, I wanted to share this encounter with reality, partly because I think many of you have faced it or will come nose to nose with an issue like this. And that issue is questions of college identity and college naming. I also wanted to share this experience because these questions of identity and naming arise out of what Michael referred to, pardon me, a new era where good things are happening in terms of truth and reconciliation. Here in Canada, we have had to come to terms with some of the uglier parts of our history involving First Nations, Indigenous, Métis, and Inuit peoples, and recognize that our country, along with our perspectives on events of the past and what we perceive to be our national identity, is changing. Naturally, out of these realizations come questions. Who are the namesakes associated with our colleges? Why were they chosen? What are their legacies? And how do we come to terms with our colonial history? In the case of Trent, the question has arisen around the legacy of Samuel de Champlain as it relates to Champlain College, one of Trent's oldest colleges and one with fiercely loyal alumni and traditions that have endured around his name. These are thorny issues. I have no easy answers or solutions, and I will say our process and investigation are still underway right now. As the chair of the Champlain Committee, I can tell you that our committee reflects that same diversity that we so value within the college systems, with members who are Indigenous, alumni, students, faculty, in philosophy and history, experts in reconciliation, law, and ethics. We are taking our time, considering as many perspectives as we possibly can. And if anything, I would say the Champlain Committee is interested in prioritizing the voices of First Nations, Indigenous people, and elders. And in doing so, we do so with no assumptions about their points of view, which are, of course, diverse and not uniform, nuanced and not simplistic. In addition to this, we are interested in what is uniquely Trent and what is a uniquely collegiate solution. And I have hope that we will arrive at one. As one historian writing on Champlain stated, the best biographers find a balance between hagiography and iconoclasm. If you're interested, we will share our results when we have completed our process. In a way, this is a coming of age for Trent's colleges and the university's identity as a collegiate institution that is a leader in Indigenous education and valuing Indigenous knowledge and ways of knowing. We take these issues seriously, of course. But as I mentioned the word age, perhaps I can leave you with a bit of a chuckle. The other day, an email that crossed my desk made me feel my age. It said, it had been fun being a baby boomer until some of the artists of the 1960s started revising their hits with new lyrics to accommodate the aging boomer generation. Herman's Hermits now sing, Mrs. Brown, you've got a lovely walker. The Bee Gees are asking, how can you mend a broken hip? Bobby Darin is crooning, splish splash, I was having a hot flash. And the lyrics to Leo Sayers' former dance tune have changed to, you make me feel like napping. Well, no matter what your age, I know that there will be no napping for all of us as we head off for the next 3 half days of dynamic dialogue on collegiate issues. My hope for you is that you come away with some glimmering moments, even new revelations. At Trent, we've been lucky enough to have a president who has reinvested in the collegiate system and re-energized interest and commitment to the colleges, recognizing their distinct and differentiating value. I think we will all discover some of the enduring values of the collegiate way. If this helps you to make your institutions stronger, more confident, more desirable, and more visible as a part of the collegiate system worldwide, we will have succeeded. So on behalf of all of our 5 colleges and all of us here at Trent, I sincerely hope this week's Collegiate Way conference is productive and meaningful, that you enjoy your connections with one another and with us here at Trent. Thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, Vice President Burns. It is an honor to have you here. We appreciate your support as always. And we do have a few minutes before we start with our session. So did anyone here have any questions that they wanted to bring up, perhaps regarding naming projects or anything else that is going on at Trent University for Maryland to respond to? All right, I'm looking for hands and things through the mix. Well, I guess if you do have any questions about the project, and the concerns over naming legacies of the colleges, I think Maryland spoke eloquently about the colonial nature of, talking about checking privilege. We need to always think about the colonial nature of colleges and, what legacies those bring, both good and bad. And so I'm sure Maryland's very happy to continue the conversation during our breaks or send her a private email. So thank you once again, Marilyn Burns, for being here. Well, folks, it's thank you again very much, Marilyn Burns, for those wonderful words. And now we're going to move to our first panel of the conference, and that is Durham University on Demand, student online platform. So I'd like to introduce our first moderator, Melanie Buttle, to take it away. Dr. Buttle.
Thanks so much, Michael. Great to see so many of you here, and a warm welcome to a virtual Trent. Yes, I am Dr. Melanie Buttle. I'm a Canadian historian. And I've actually been to Durham and walked around your beautiful campus. So I haven't really had the full inside tour, but I really loved what I saw of Durham when I was there a couple of years ago. So what we're going to do here is the panel topic is Durham University on Demand, student online platforms. And I am going to let the panelists talk a little bit more about what that is. And I'm going to just give you a little bit of information about our panelists in 1 second here. We have I think just under an hour, and what I hope is that our panelists can give can sort of take it away and do their piece and leave enough time, as Michael said earlier, for a nice conversation. So you can enter questions or comments in the chat if you want during the panel, and I'll try and call them out as we go near the end. And you can also wave a real hand or a virtual hand, and I'll try to pay attention as we get to that and moderate a little discussion at the end. So with us today, we have Jeremy Cook, Quentin Sloper, and Lindsay Finnemore. Jeremy is the Pro Vice Chancellor, Colleges and Student Experience, which is responsible for promoting the wider student experience at Durham, including the overall strategic direction of the colleges and student experience division, incorporating the Student Support and Wellbeing Directorate and Student Enrichment Directorate. Jeremy champions the student support and enrichment agenda at the highest levels at the university, and his goal is to ensure that the wider student experience at Durham is unsurpassed in Europe and on a par with the best institutions worldwide. Jeremy joined Durham University in 2019 from the British Army, where he most recently served as Deputy Director of the Army's Collective Training Transformation Program. He previously led the Army's Strategic Training Governance Review, served as Station Commander and Commanding Officer of 9 Regiment Army Corps, and was a departmental head in the Army Operations Headquarters, coordinating overseas operational planning and the generation of security forces for the London 2012 Olympic Games. For his work, he was appointed Officer of the Order of the British Empire. Jeremy holds an undergraduate degree in mechanical engineering from Nottingham University and a master's degree in information systems from Cranfield University. So welcome to Jeremy. That's great. And I'm going to read the other 2 and then completely open the floor to the 3 of you. Quentin Sloper is the Director of Student Enrichment, which reports directly to the Pro-Vice Chancellor, Colleges and Student Experience, to develop student enrichment provision across the university, including the colleges. Quentin has direct oversight of the university's specialized enrichment units, sport and physical activity, the performing arts, student media, volunteering, and community outreach, and is also responsible for the growth and integration of the university's online enrichment capabilities and the delivery of the pan-university personal enrichment programs. Quentin's office also provides a coherent organizational structure to coordinate and facilitate enrichment output across the institution, including the development of best practice, sharing of resources, policy development, and consistency of approach. He started his career at Durham as a sabbatical officer for sport and physical activity, and went on to occupy a range of student enrichment programs, leadership programs, initially in sport and then into the performing arts. Quentin was appointed Director of Experience Durham in 2016, and alongside the Pro-Vice Chancellor led the transition of the department to the Student Enrichment Directorate in early 2022. Quentin has occupied a range of non-executive board member roles within British universities and colleges sport, and held the post of the Director of British University Sport Competitions until 2016. I'm picturing a lot of physical competition now with the Army and the athletics that I've read about so far. And Lindsay Finnemore is responsible for the management of delivery of the university's personal enrichment program, the Durham Inspired Award, the establishment and growth of the university's externally facing student enrichment digital platform, and the growth of related student media, including film production. She works directly with student clubs and societies, building strong relationships with student leaders to ensure the successful and sustainable growth of enrichment projects and programs across the institution, including the colleges. Before joining the Student Enrichment Directorate, Lindsay was vice principal for Ustenov College, with a particular focus on leading the strategic development for the college, promoting a research and scholarly environment, the progression of the student enrichment development agenda, and building effective networks locally, nationally, and internationally. Before this, Lindsay has also held a variety of posts supporting and implementing the university's internationalization strategy, including global opportunities and partnerships, international student well-being and immigration, international student recruitment events, and admissions. Lindsay holds an undergraduate degree in business administration and is studying for a master's degree in strategic leadership. I'm sure you've all heard many words and terms that relate to lots of things we do in all the colleges. So I know we're all looking forward to this panel. I will turn it over to the 3 of you. And I believe, Lindsay, you had said that you were going to share screen, and I think you should be able to do that. So welcome to all 3 of you, and thanks for joining us.
Melanie, thank you. That's a really lovely introduction. Thank you very much. We're getting feedback. We got 2. We good this end. I'm hearing it back twice. Strange.
I can't hear feedback. I think you're okay.
Oh, I'm probably getting this end. Okay, so good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where you are. Thank you for the opportunity to talk to you about our own experience providing a digital platform for wider student experience during the pandemic. I think I really, Marilyn's words really chime with me. I have to pinch myself sometimes in this job that what a fantastic job this is. To be able to lead the collegiate environment and the wider student experience is something, I just wake up some days and think, wow, what a job I have. I'm brought back down to earth with many a drama or student crisis, but it's a real pleasure to do what I do. And I took over from Martin in 2019, so I'm 3 years into the job this summer, and he left me in a good place. So we're here today to talk about how we maintained our sense of community and sense of belonging during COVID. And that for us, one of those tools for that was the Durham On Demand platform. So we're going to talk about that. The challenge we faced was how we could maintain that sense of collegiality and community and belonging, as well as opportunities for personal development, whilst our young students were either in their rooms at home, in their rooms overseas, or trapped in some cases in the colleges because they haven't been able to get back to their homes as the pandemic struck. And I was really struck by what you said, Marilyn, about the social, experiential, the intellectual, the physical and the communal side. Of course, we had no physical part of that. So how do we deliver those other components of the collegiate experience during this time? So quite a challenge. We scratched our heads, but we quickly realized we needed to provide a digital offering. Enterprising colleges, and the 17 of them here, they're all fantastic, had already started to shift to online formals where they would be given a menu and start to cook for themselves and break bread over a digital platform. And they were literally eating together in digital space. But we needed more than that. We needed to do more. We needed to take it to that next level. So we started to develop what we call the Durham On Demand platform, a virtual space where we could post, share, live stream, and develop the platform. I won't steal the thunder of my colleagues because Lindsay and Quentin are going to talk to this. It's really just an intro for me. But what I will say is that we've learned huge amounts. And this digital platform has taught us some good things, some bad things, some things we wouldn't do again. None of us believe that digital platforms are the future for the wider student experience, particularly in a collegiate setting. You have to have that physical element to get community. And I think the Zoom fatigue, and as we've discussed before, it's there. But what we really are starting to see, and we're firm believers, is that digital platforms will be part of the future. What it's seen now is it offers a potentially hugely complementary offering alongside the in-place face-to-face student experience and the wider student experience, particularly in a collegiate setting. So there's something there, we think. I'm really keen to talk to you more and answer questions. I'm going to stop talking because I want to hand over to the team to take you through what they did, what they've seen, or what they've learnt on those lessons. So I'm going to do that now. I'm going to stop talking, hand across, and then we'll be about 15 minutes, and then there's a chance to really pick this apart, really understand what it offers, what the future might be, and really answer some of those knotty questions of what this platform can give us. Quentin, over to you and Liz.
Thank you. I think it's me taking it forward. Can I just check, can everybody see my screen? Can you see the PowerPoint?
Yes, we can.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Thanks, Jeremy. So this is the Durham difference in normal times. As Jeremy mentioned, the coronavirus pandemic significantly affected the day-to-day lifestyle and well-being of us all. But students found themselves in a really unique situation, perhaps isolating in a household or a college with other people they didn't know or didn't know very well. Others found themselves studying at university remotely without the opportunity to engage with fellow students or to familiarise themselves with the university campus and the usual student activities that take place. So what we're going to run through with you now is our initial response during COVID-19, which was mainly focused around the platform, what our findings were, the broader opportunity beyond lockdown, and what we think the next steps are. So like you, we discovered that our students had an appetite to engage with the university and to participate in student life as much as they could, whilst being respectful of the COVID restrictions. This wish to engage was met with an equal desire from us to provide opportunities from across the university, from our colleges, our professional support services, and the Student Enrichment Directorate, as we all embraced the digital revolution and moved at unprecedented speed and with agility to meet the challenges presented to us. As a university, we established working groups amongst our domains of participation. So we see student participation separated into 7 different domains. And we began to draw together expertise from across the university to focus and build our online presence around these 7 domains. Central to that, as always, were our students who helped and guided us and identified the kind of opportunities we should be looking towards. But we started off basic. We thought, okay, so what can we quickly put online very, very easily? What are the easy things we can do? And you'll see in the top corner there, exercise classes were one of the first things that we were able to turn into a digital experience very, very easily. So things like club size, HIIT, core, those daily exercise classes to keep our students fit and healthy were the first things that we sort of established. Next steps were reviewing what else we could offer and making it happen, really. So I don't think you'll be surprised if we say quizzes, cookery lessons, interviews with leaders in industry, a few famous faces amongst there too, lecture series, Q&As, podcasts, and even eventually a remote festival of college sport. We all managed to get that online, but we didn't do it by ourselves. We did that collaboratively. So we had all this amazing stuff starting to happen. Now, whether it was one person in a bedroom doing a drama or a collaborative team working together to produce content, but we needed somewhere, a home for that content. All these amazing things we could make happen, but that's how the Durham On Demand digital platform really came into being. And I'm just going to change view, so I'm hoping you're following me with this. Apologies, it'll just take a moment to load in. So we had a vision for our digital platform, our hub, to be a one-stop shop to signpost staff and students to the growing collection of content, events, and support and activities that were taking place online when restrictions allowed us to do that, also in a blended way. This is the platform that we established, Durham On Demand. It was established using SharePoint site, and we were set about designing it, taking design cues from things that were essentially the design trends that were leading the way in 2020 and 2021. So very big, bold visuals, bright colours, very little text and lots of imagery. And it was designed so that we didn't want it to feel very corporate. We wanted it to feel like it was engaging, inclusive space, that a digital space that we could start to bring together our communities and individuals to explore the offer that we had. Key to it was establishing a what's on guide that spanned the whole university. We all knew that things were happening, but actually as an organisation, we didn't have that one central place where everyone could go to and just find out what was happening today, this week, this month. Additional, so there was 5 key areas: the What's On Guide, our workshops, Explore From Home, Watch Again, and podcasts. All of them have slightly different looks and feels, but we worked closely, like I say, with our students, with our colleges, with other professional support services to get the right content onto the platform. So if I can take you please to our What's On Guide. As I said, this is very much how do we advertise what's happening? How can students find out where it is, where, if it's online, if it's in person, if it's hybrid, what time it's on. So this became central to advertising all the different events that we had happening. And for those students that couldn't attend at the time of the event, the Watch Again page became vital to us. So that content was recorded, and it didn't necessarily have to be hugely professional at that point, just recorded and made available as quickly as possible on the Watch Again. So if you were unable to attend for whatever reason, you could still access, still engage, still be very much part of the Durham community. My colleagues work very hard to establish some workshops so we could upskill our students as well during the COVID-19 pandemic. Things that you will see, so obviously we are keen to have content on the platform, so how can we upskill our students so they can help us to create that content and get it up here. And the workshops here, as you will see, were available for our students to attend or to watch at a later date. It was a very good opportunity for us to look across the university and see all the different podcasts that were happening. So we became aware we've got Purple Radio. It's our award-winning student radio station. Brilliant opportunity for us to promote that as well. And all the different various podcasts that were taking part, that were happening across the university, including this special Conversations in Quarantine, which were run by my former colleague Kate Barton in the Assembly Rooms Theatre at Durham. So it was really, really exciting things that we had happening. The other element of the platform that I would just want to draw your attention to is this. So we had our colleagues in the libraries and collections section were also at the same time simultaneously bringing their collections to life. So in being able to embed that so our students could engage with those activities as well was really, really important to us, having a platform to showcase all this activity. So this to us was a starting point. Our SharePoint site, as I've said, it was built in SharePoint. It was very rudimentary. We've built on it, tried to make it look engaging, tried to put the right content on, tried to be quite timely. But we recognise that SharePoint does have its limitations. It's internal facing, so we can't share any of the brilliant stuff that our students were doing during lockdown more widely. It's internal only, and we can't segregate some of the details off. So any content that's put on here is available to everybody. But one of the really good things that came out from establishing this project was getting students engagement, understanding that across the university there was this desire to be involved in this project across the whole organisation at different levels. Exploring and experimenting with different content was really exciting too, because one of the key things we found was content or things that we ran in a face-to-face capacity did not always translate well into a virtual space. And that gave us license to develop new things, to look at things through a different lens, and to try new things and to be a bit brave and see whether they would happen. And I think that's one of the key takeaways that we have learned from this, is that we shouldn't necessarily be replicating just our face-to-face activities, but this is a space that we can have blended activities going forward that can be different from those activities that have traditionally taken place in our colleges. I'm going to hand you back to Quentin now, if that's okay.
Thank you, Lindsay. Really put me in a really good place just to just talk through, upon reflection, some elements that were obvious but weren't at the time, around actually how going forward, as we hopefully move beyond lockdowns and into back to a face-to-face environment, actually how this can still be of value to us, or how we think it can still be of value to us going forward. And the first one I'd want to start on is actually a challenge that I suspect may be something that you're all familiar with. Something that this platform did, to some extent at least, was help us unite together what we call our wider student experience, so co-curricular activity, whatever the phrases that you use, between what takes place in our brilliant, vibrant colleges and what happens through our more pan-university central structures. It's always a challenge of us to establish how we present those opportunities coherently to our students, and also bring them together so that we can share best practice and develop. And actually, this online platform gave us an opportunity to do that to some extent, because we had one hub where everything could be advertised, where everything could be seen, regardless of where it was taking place in the university. And Lindsay shared the what's on guide element, which is critical to that. And whilst as we move back to a predominantly face-to-face environment, that's now presenting us some new challenges again. Our sincere hope, and we'll talk about where we're actually taking the platform in a moment, is that this will give us an opportunity to provide a level of coherence also for face-to-face activities, so students have a one-stop shop essentially to see what's going on, regardless of whether it's in a college and regardless of whether it's taking place in the pan-university sports team or performing arts or volunteering. But the trick is, and again, I'm sure you will relate to this, ensuring that we don't lose any sense of lost ownership in the context of branding and look and feel, and that all of our colleges have still got the space to showcase their wares in a way that shows what they're doing. And that's something that we're trying to work through. But I did just want to say that that's one element that we think the platform will help us with, or also putting together what we're doing face to face. Secondly to that, and this is probably an obvious one, but it wasn't at the time, we actually do think that it's improving accessibility to our wider student experience. So some of the challenges we face, postgraduate students in particular, that those with caring responsibilities, those that for whatever reason are not in Durham for a period of time, historically have found it really difficult to engage in any of our wider student experience activities. Clearly, the platform has meant that actually a lot of what takes place and continues to do so, people can do from their bedroom, so that they don't have the travel time, which is really helpful. And I guess the on-demand element, whereby people can click in when they choose and catch up on some of what's going on, is another addition, what means people can engage, at least to some extent, but whenever they choose to do so. We've also worked out that from a profile raising perspective, there's a real opportunity here, and we'd love to hear other colleagues' thoughts in this respect. Something we really struggle to do is tell our stories, what goes on campus, or what our students do wherever they are in the world, to prospective students, parents, to our own staff members. And actually this platform, we feel, will give us an opportunity to do that on a day-to-day basis in a way that we've never been able to do before. And actually, a couple of days ago, I was talking to our international team. We'll all be familiar with seeking to recruit international students who might never come to campus until they're coming to study, and they have to make those choices, but based on what they're seeing online and digitally. And we think there's a real opportunity here to showcase Durham in a slightly different way and showcase the experiences in a way that we've never been able to do before. And linked to that, very similarly, our alumni and wider stakeholder engagement, something I suspect many of us experienced during COVID, partly because a lot of people had a little bit more time during the lockdown phases, I should say, was that you can engage alumni online sometimes in a way that you simply cannot face to face, because they don't have to travel. It's very easy to click and have an hour. And I see Anne, who's master at Hatfield College, principal, on the call, and I can recall a number of events in her college alone that may or may not have happened if we'd been in a face-to-face space, because of the way we were able to engage our alumni. From our perspective, one of the things that I remember and cherish was we did a question of sport, which for those familiar with BBC One television in the UK might be able to relate to. Essentially, it's two teams. It's a sports quiz that has been on TV for many years. Well, we had 3 Olympic medalists on that call, none of which were from Durham, actually, so not even our alum, but individuals who were prepared to work with the university and give an hour of their time to be part of something that many, and our students competed against them actually, in a way that wouldn't have been possible in a face-to-face environment. So we have worked out through leadership talks, through master classes, through college debates, through lecture series, often and most often going on in colleges, that there's a real opportunity to engage really key people that we want to hear from and we want to learn from in a way that we hadn't been able to do as well in a face-to-face environment. Clearly, now where we are today is finding that medium, because as we all know, and we've talked about, Zoom fatigue is not something that any of us enjoy experiencing, and therefore it's trying to find that balance. Data capture is something that, again, I'd be keen to hear how others deal with that on a day-to-day basis. How many people engage in our student events and activities? And how do we find out about that? Well, clearly from an online perspective, this platform gives us that number clicking in a way that we don't have face to face, but actually something we're building into the new platform. So we're in the process of building an externally facing platform that will enable us to engage, of course, all staff and students, but a wider world, including our alumni. It will have a membership system in that to also enable all of our clubs and societies that operate face to face to essentially collect data and for us to get a better sense of actually what's going on our campus on a day-to-day basis. And linked to that, we believe those numbers will be high, and we hope that engagement in our platform going forward will be high. And therefore, one of the things we think we may also be able to do on the back of it is income generate through potentially pay-per-view with our alumni, watching a particular sports fixture, be that at a university level, or more often than not, actually, some college rivalries bring in the very biggest number of supporters, and we think we'll be able to engage our alumni in that respect. But of course, if we have a platform where 50% of our students are regular in some way, shape or form, looking at the platform or being part of it, there's some sponsorship opportunities as well for external organisations to promote themselves again to an audience that in purely face-to-face terms it is very difficult to get those higher numbers. The one bit I just wanted to dwell on as well before we open it up to a broader forum was how it's enabled us to accelerate student film. So Durham has a series of real strengths when it comes to its wider student experience. We would never have historically said that filmmaking, be that in a commercial sense or a creative sense, was something that we were renowned for. Doesn't mean that there weren't brilliant things going on amongst our student body, and of course there would have been, but it's actually provided a real focus for us to accelerate the development of another, what we would call enrichment pillar, because of course something like this is only as good as its content. And where's that content going to come from? Predominantly our students, who we're trying to work with to support them to develop their skill sets, to provide them with kit, be that editing platforms, be that actually cameras to go out and record. So it's really provided us with a stimulus to develop another element of our wider student experience that we haven't in the past. And that's led us to, and Lindsay is leading it, and as I've just said, beginning to build a platform with an external provider that we will have by next October, that will be based on elements of what you've seen today, but will also be relatively similar to some of the more established online platforms that are out there. So in this BBC iPlayer is an example that many people will be familiar with. And we believe it's a product, not because we think we bumped into a unique idea that nobody else has thought of for 1 second, but based on the research that we've done when we were looking to build it, it's something that very few institutions truly have, essentially a Durham University TV channel, as it were, with many other functions that go with it. And something that we would love to do perhaps through virtual circulation 6 to 8 months from now would be just to share you that platform and see whether it was something that any other institutions were interested in building on, because as I say, we think we're in the process of building something that's relatively unique, but may be of value to many other institutions for a number of reasons. And that, I think, draws to a conclusion our element, and we will hand back over to others to ask away.
Thanks so much, Quentin, and thanks, Lindsay and Jeremy. That's really interesting. It's fun and interesting looking at the things that are similar and the things that are different. And I'm sure I saw lots of nods on the screen because lots of us, jumped into what we, kind of called pandemic opportunities, which was trying to reach out in different ways. So that was really great. And thank you for showing us the imagery of what you were doing as well. It was, and the last thing you said, Quentin, about almost like a television station that then has other pieces, because I was thinking about how many of us have portals or networks or online hubs for students. We have those, but you're bringing a different piece of on-demand and recorded watching that I think got us all thinking. So thanks to all three of you. And does anybody want to ask a question? Scanning. Do you know how many people have been interacting? Oh, sorry, I'll go to Clark first. I want to know about numbers of people that that have been jumping on, but Clark, you go first.
Well, thank you. I put a question in the session Q&A, but I'll just read it here. I'm really fascinated. I think it's a deeply engaging kind of platform that you set up. I think it's a remarkably astute answer to an era-defining challenge that we have all lived through. I suppose what I would be interested in learning more about, if you can tell me, educate me in this, is tell me about the kind of learning curve that you encountered, maybe not just you, but your colleges and individuals with SharePoint as a platform, and kind of how much work had to precede all of this effort, how much kind of ongoing educational work did you have to do with colleges and individuals as they were learning the platform. Thank you.
Lindsay, I'm absolutely sure you're certainly best off taking the SharePoint element, because I know that was tens and tens, if not hundreds of hours of work. So you start there and see what other bits we can fill in.
Yeah, absolutely happy to take that one. So the design and build of SharePoint sat within our team. And as Quentin's indicated, it did take a significant time to build it. It wasn't easy, but I think that's because we were pushing the boundaries of what we could do with SharePoint at that time. We absolutely saw the standard SharePoint communication sites that were coming out and felt very much that if we pushed another one of those out to our students, that they possibly wouldn't engage with it in the same way that we wanted them to. So things like getting the color change. So you'll see it's got a black background with green highlights and things like that. That wasn't a university branded color scheme at the time. So things like that took actually a lot longer than building it. And then trying to create, we had to build an external app to enable us to create the what's on guide. So the only way we could get SharePoint to display it in a way that looked anything like a proper events listing page was to build an external app that went and grabbed the data from someone else and brought it across. So that was more trial and error, I think, at the time, because that code actually, probably shouldn't say this, but we had a lucky find on the internet, and we were Googling, how can we make this look nice? How can we make this work? And I came across a piece of code and took it to our CIS team and said, I think maybe this is what we're looking for, but can we use it? Can we try it? And it was lots of trial and error to try and make that work. So once it was built, it was fairly straightforward, but actually getting it built took a significant period of time and effort. In terms of how we then asked colleagues to engage with it as a small team, so I managed a small team that then took over responsibility for uploading the content of it, for keeping the what's on page up to date, for updating the news section of it, for putting the workshops on there, for updating all the different design elements of it, making sure that the content at the other end, so the watch again content, was updated fairly regularly. So in terms of engaging and upskilling our colleagues across the university, this particular project didn't necessarily do that, but there were other Office 365 engagement projects that rolled out across the organisation that upskilled staff. I'm thinking about, certainly we launched this in the February last year, and the previous summer there was a big rollout project of upskilling all our staff, and they brought in external consultants to enable us to learn all the new technology and understand it. Created change champions and digital champions that could then cascade that learning and understanding out, and that change champion and digital champion network is still going strong. So quite often get pings into our teams to ask, how do we do this in SharePoint? How do we do that? So that was more of an organizational level than at this level at the platform. I hope that answers your question.
Lindsay, it's probably just worth taking that one step further in terms of the thinking we're now doing for the new platform, because it's built into, Clark, some of the elements that I think you've asked. Clearly, what we want is for as many students and staff to have the ability to be able to upload it as a starting point, because otherwise you don't get the broader engagement, and it's the only way to essentially be able to resource it effectively. However, of course, the challenges that you bump into is, what does that governance look like? What do the permissions look like to ensure quality control? So something that Lindsay is working very hard with our CIS IT team at the currently is building a series of permissions that enable students and staff to be able to get so far, but still with a final check required from a core team. And that's something that I think we would recommend anybody giving some thought to this builds in, because of course the big danger is 99% of people use it absolutely in the right way, but somebody decides it's an opportunity to do something else, and that causes any number of problems. And it's something very much on our mind as we go forward.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're building those roles into the new platform. So we will have content editors and content creators, and what our design team call a super admin, which will be a member of staff. So that each section, so we will have it split probably amongst the 7 domains of participation. And within each section, for example, I'm going to say Trevelyan College. So within Trevelyan College, you have your student body. Thank you, Martin. You have your student body. You have your college events as well. And then everybody within the college would be able to upload their content in a pre-agreed format. So the platform itself would only accept the format in a pre-agreed way. And that content would then essentially need just to sign off a check off from somebody within the college to prove that, to say that it was ready and able to go live.
Great, thank you for that. That was a good explanation. And just briefly, have you had good engagement? Like, have you had a look at how used it was?
Yeah, we've certainly the SharePoint site gives you limited tracking data. So anybody who's used SharePoint will see that data drops off after a little while. But the stats, I think we had something like 3,500 live or pre-recorded events, out of which we had something like 9,000 unique views. So when we say unique views, they are individual students that are going in and looking at it. And our events were accessed, I want to say, about 270,000 times. So that is all the different hits that we got on the SharePoint site. Obviously, the new tracking system on the new platform, when the bespoke platform, when it's launched later this year, will be more sophisticated. Will be able to tell us in more detail who engaged, where they engaged, how they engaged, and we will be able to then enable some feedback from them as well. I can see Jeremy's got his hand up. Jeremy, would you like to come in?
Yeah, and I was going to just, Lindsay, don't let me stop you. I was going to just follow with a supplementary, really. So if you're done, just if you're happy. I think the challenge I've set the team now with this new platform is how we avoid information overload and swamping students with so many different multi-social media feeds that this becomes relevant to them. We have a program running at the university called Creating an Integrated Student Experience, the CISE, C-I-S-E. And that aims to, we've got a fantastic CIO, John Hemingway, who sadly is leaving. So an opportunity coming up in September. An amazing guy who's really transformed the digital debt at Durham in a time frame that we didn't even think was vaguely possible. So we're looking to create, a student app. So there is a sort of one portal, an entry point, probably phone-based, because that's where young people all are. I mean, my 23-year-old is certainly never off her phone. And it's a vehicle that you don't even get a sense that you're necessarily on this platform. It's the place you go to. The what's on is got to be the same place your student timetable is held. So there's an academic nature to it. You want to be able to understand it. There's other data, whether your health data, you could do your referral, student support should almost seamlessly link with this. But having that ability, so this platform doesn't become another place you have to go and therefore becomes a barrier. And it just becomes seamlessly integrated, and almost you don't see, you just go there by clicking a button and it takes you to that level. And that for us is the challenge, how we make this used. Because the danger, of course, if it becomes a platform that it's too difficult, or it's another thing, you've got to change apps, you've got to go out of this different files. The risk is they just won't go there. We want them to be able to use it seamlessly as part of their student experience. we're back to face largely. Fingers crossed that we're largely through in herd immunity, but there could be another variant. We never know, and we can go backwards and forwards. But we want it to be a complementary piece to the face-to-face experience. And then oh, I missed that. I didn't go to that site, but I can watch that online. And getting that out there, getting that message, and getting that seamlessness nature to it is a challenge. I've really set the team and say, how does this work? How do we make sure this doesn't become something that is just 7 clicks too far away to get to, if you know what I mean, that kind of in that digital sense. So really interesting. I don't know, if you want any other questions there, but Quentin, Lindsay, do you want to help them understand what we're trying to do in that space?
I'll just add one element to that, and it plays perfectly into you talking about the complementary elements. So when Lindsay was just speaking, I was thinking one of the events and occasions that gave us some real confidence that this has got a future was actually our Freshers' Fair activities. So in 2021, like I suspect many, if not all of you, that was entirely online, and we used the platform for that. And I think, Lindsay, we had somewhere between 5,000 and 6,000 students engaging. And I'm talking about the Pan University Freshers' Fair at the beginning of the year, although a number of our colleges used it for their own ones as well. But actually, in the October just gone, where we essentially had a broadly normal face-to-face Freshers' Fair, although there were some restrictions in place, we still saw over 2,000 students engage online. Now, we don't know whether they were the same students or different students, because we don't have that level of data, but that was one of the occasions in recent months that has given me some assurance that as we do move forward into, as Jeremy said, something that is more face-to-face than online for most of us, there really is a complementary function here. And that was one very good example of it. And there will be many more, I'm sure.
Yeah, thanks for that, Quentin. I'm going to turn to Martin. And I think one of the things as you were talking, as I'm heading to Martin, is you've articulated, all of you, something that all of us have also wrestled with. Well, 2 things. One is the central umbrella versus the collegiate and how those two fit together. We've all been there. A magical app, oh my goodness, like we've all had that conversation as well. And I think that last question that you just touched on, which is, will people move back to craving only in person, or is the online because you don't know if it's successful when they can go nowhere, or if it will continue to have legs when they can get out of their room and go somewhere. So I think all of those are really prescient for all of us, but I'll turn to Martin.
Thanks. Well, I'm almost kind of interested in the opposite, the problems of success. So is there any danger that the in-person engagement might it might be so, as it were, almost displaced by what's available in this fantastic online program, and I'm just so impressed. But I wonder whether it might, to some extent, kind of mute or impede the re-engagement with the in-person stuff.
Lindsay, should I give an initial view? And Anne, given that you're on the call, I might be, if you wouldn't mind, give a bit of a view from a college principal's perspective as well. The general answer to that, I think, is no, in the context of it's quite clearly at Durham, as we have moved back to a more face-to-face environment. Digital WSE is not going to, and never was going to, become the dominant factor. However, something that I'm very, very aware of, and I think it's about habits at the moment, we are definitely seeing a huge reduction in engagement for face-to-face talks and lectures and debates. And I know in my team, and I'm seeing some nods elsewhere, that at times we have reluctantly said, okay, we'll put this online because we're not getting enough people willing to turn up at 7 p.m. at X Lecture Theatre on a Tuesday. But if we click it to Teams, all of a sudden 50 people are willing to turn up. So I don't think, and I'd love to bring Anne in, and Lindsay, of course, as well. I don't think it's in danger of trumping it in any way, shape or form. I think we can use it in a reactionary way to react to the changing habits of students, and hopefully in doing so we don't further create the problem for a longer period of time by actually almost bowing to what our students want, when maybe we fit. Of course we want to give our students what they want, but maybe we would have a view that we'd like to try and instill no, this is better face to face, because it can be a richer conversation at times. So perhaps that's the danger, that we don't try hard enough to get people back face to face for some of these activities because we've got another option. But yeah, and then over to you, Lindsay.
Yeah, I think we're all in very experimental phase, and because it's a badly controlled experiment, such that we have a whole year of something and then a whole year of something else, and students have been through 2 years of something odd, and so they're not the same kind of students as those we had before. So it's quite difficult to come to well evidenced conclusions. Certainly the desire to be back to face and join in face-to-face activities is, I'm sure everybody else, depending what stage you're at returning to that, is absolutely huge, though largely for the less formal kind of occasion. So I think, as Quentin's referred to, the drop off in attendance at presentations and lectures, I actually don't think that's new. I think that's actually something which has come for some time. And students who are in lectures, in presentations much of the day for other reason, it isn't always the most appealing format. So I think these developments are great and a great adjunct, I think. We just have to make sure they are an adjunct, but not just for students, but actually maybe others have the same issue. Within the university, we have quite an issue in ensuring our other colleagues are aware of all the marvelous things that go on in the wider student experience and in colleges. So there's not an unuseful PR job to be done by blasting them with huge numbers of stuff. They can just click in and look briefly and just be overwhelmed at the marvelousness of it. That would have huge value for us, it has to be said. And as Jeremy particularly has said, our alumni. And then I don't think we should dismiss the smaller numbers of students whose particular circumstances, we don't have a lot of distance learning in Durham, we have very little, but the particular circumstances of students on occasion be hugely valuable, that they can remain connected and it, to some extent, join in the things they would have liked to join in face to face if their circumstances are different. I think we also have a longer term record of what we do. That also, much of what we do in Durham is ephemeral. I mean, it's today, you missed it, it's gone. And that for students, for others in the university, for alumni, I think is highly valuable. So we've made a big start. There's a long way to go, and with the Luddites like me, you've got a very long way to go to get me to really engage with these things. I too enjoy the returning to face, but I think I hope what people have seen is that there's a kind of thoughtful, reflective, ongoing discussion approach rather than a magic bullet, which we should all buy into and do everything this way. That's not the way it's being prevented. It's a tool, and we should explore it and change and alter what we do as we go along.
Thanks, Anne. Very well said, and I think reflects what all of us are nodding at, right? All of the things you're saying make sense to what we're all experiencing, and interestingly, across the world with student engagement and students online. And I think all of us felt, as Martin did, are we keeping them in their little bedrooms? But I know that's not the case, and I know we're all doing some version of what you're doing. Lindsay, I'll turn quickly to you, and then I have two more questions. We can go a couple minutes over, but not too much. So Lindsay, if you want to add anything, go for it. And then I'm going to turn to our to Eleanor and David.
Yeah, I think I would just add, just echo exactly what Anne said, really. I think that is very true, that we are having those thoughtful conversations. And one of the conversations I had with colleagues in performing arts last week was around this idea of, do we actually want our students to sit and watch an hour of a show or listen to an hour's worth of music, or do we want to present something different to them as an audience as well? So actually, do we want to put a spotlight on the producer, the musical producer, or the technician, or the cast of a particular show, and use the on-demand platform in a slightly different way to say, let's have a sit-down chat show equivalent that highlights all the different performing arts activities, where you have a host that sits and has those conversations in a very informal and relaxed way and introduces the show. So I think there's lots of different ways we can use the platform. I think using it to segment content off, I think, is one of the advantages of the new platform. So how do we want to present it to certain groups of students as well? But it does open up a whole new set of potential programming that we could use to engage students that perhaps aren't coming to these face-to-face events. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. Eleanor, I'll turn to you and then David before we wrap up.
Brilliant, thanks, Melanie, and thank you guys so much for sharing that with a wider audience, and just to offer a college perspective really, and to expand on something that Anne touched on there. This is a marvelous kind of add-on. It's value added for our students who are in Durham, able to engage, able-bodied, you know, have the time and leisure to engage. I think for those students who are, for whatever reason, out of Durham, maybe they're on a year abroad, maybe they are some of our part-time distance learners, maybe they are one of our growing number of local students who actually don't live in our colleges or live in Durham City, maybe they're students with caring responsibilities, mature students with their own families. I think this is a bit of a lifeline. It's a way to plug into the university community beyond their academic department. That for some students is the sort of main route into the university really, and I think we can't underestimate the importance of that for our non-traditional students, and I think that the work that's been going into this in recent years has been absolutely fantastic, and I think it's an ill wind that blows no good, and I think that if there is some good to come out of our experience of the COVID pandemic, it's the fact that we're all a little more switched on now to the potential of online engagement and what that can mean for some of those non-traditional students that we have been and are still trying so hard to attract, and not only to attract but also to retain as well. So thank you very much, guys, for that this evening.
Yeah, thanks. Absolutely. I think that's, spurring us on to new ways of thinking about things and how to engage with students in multiple platforms is what this has opened up for us. David, last question to you.
Yeah, I think possibly an observation as much as a question, and thank you. That I just felt that resonated very strongly with the experiences we're having on the opposite side of the world to Durham. And George is also from Otago. He's nodding away. I guess one of the things, and Anne kind of touched on this, is that we're kind of running this massive live experiment at the moment, not by design really, but really by accident. And one of the questions we're grappling with really is to what extent are changes in student preference around how they access their learning and their student experience are temporary or not. And one of the things we're thinking about very clearly here is, I'm sure everyone else is, that our incoming cohort of students who've gone through their schooling system have had a very disrupted and online schooling system as well, experience as well. So my question really is, what will be profoundly significant in terms of long-term change, and what will be temporary and will wash out? I guess we don't know the answer, but I think you've really led that really well with this presentation.
Yes, thank you. And I think, I feel like the presenters touched a little bit on that exact thing. How will we know what the next iteration looks like and whether it will be temporary or permanent? But I think what you've shown us is that the things we thought we were designing that might be stopgaps or band-aids are like, well, that was actually more than a band-aid. That was great. That solved a problem. And I love that you're showing us that in a platform that has such vibrancy. I will just ask, before I say thanks to all of you and give you your social break and networking and bio break, did you want to add anything on there, Quentin or Lindsay or Jeremy, to that last comment? looking comfortable.
Oh, I'd just like to thank everybody, for the opportunity and the feedback. It's exactly that, David. We are all, and Anne said it beautifully with her, trying to thoughtfully really understand what we can take from this going forward, and what is good, what is not good, and where it goes next. We definitely feel there's an opportunity in some of this. I don't want this to become a big white elephant that is an expensive piece of work that then doesn't get used. It's how we make sure that way, and the opportunities are exploited. But we don't want to put too much into this, because the students really do, we're saying, want to get back to face-to-face. This has got to be complementary. This has got to support what we do, and enhance what we do alongside that. And I think that's where we see this going. But it's it's balancing that, because of course we started really driving this a year ago, and then we're in, we're out, and we don't know yet. We don't. That's the thing. Key point, as I think David said, we've got a lot to learn and lots of questions to really understand as to what the student experience ends up being, what is residual, and what goes back to prior norms. So it's a fascinating time to see it, and but we think there's something really good in this, and something valuable to take forward. So we'll keep you posted, and I think my CIS colleagues would love to sell you it as well, but I'm not going to give it. I'm not doing a sales. That's not what we're here for. It's just to really share it with you. And again, I think in the Collegiate Way sense, maybe there's something about a platform we can all post on each other's. There's a bridge, maybe there's a network we can get that into Collegiate International element to this, and share some experience across that, and have little links out to different places. There's something possibly in that as well, so we can look at that.
I just want to say thanks, Jeremy, for that. And yes, I'll be reaching out to you, because I do agree with that. There could be that intercollegiate thing that we could be doing around the world, which would be wonderful. Melanie, sorry.
Great. Oh, no worries. Thank you, Michael. I think we'll take that opportunity to say a very deep thanks and appreciation to Jeremy and Quentin and Lindsay for being the first presenters, and for a really good, succinct, and visually appealing presentation that we all nodded a lot to, because we're all having similar experiences. So thanks to all of you. Thanks to the Durham team, and appreciate everybody's presence here. And we'll just take our little break now. And thank you.
Good afternoon, or good morning, good evening, as we've said to everyone. I'm so pleased to welcome everybody to the session on student support in the time of COVID. As Michael said, I'm Christine Freeman-Roth, and I'm principal of Lady College here at Trent University. I really do wish I was welcoming you here to LEC, as we call it, on this beautiful spring day, but I'm really pleased to moderate this session on a really important topic, and something that I know, have all been presented with challenges and opportunities over the last couple of years. We have four speakers, 3 presentations in the next hour. And I do hope we can make space for some discussion and questions. So let's get started. First up is Eleanor Spencer Regan with her presentation, Mind the Gap, supporting working class and first generation students during COVID-19. I'm just meeting Eleanor, and I'm so thrilled too, and many of you already know her. Eleanor is the Vice Principal at Colleges and Student Experience at Durham University. Until recently, she was Vice Principal and Senior Tutor at St. Chad's College. She's Principal-elect of Janet Clark Hall at the University of Melbourne, and is due to relocate with her family to Australia in July 2022. That's very exciting. She has particular interests in widening participation, sexual misconduct, and violent prevention in higher education institutions, the development of non-teaching colleges as multi-generational and interdisciplinary scholarly communities, and story-based alumni engagement and donor stewardship strategies. Her academic background is in English literature, and she remains research active in fields of children's and YA literature and contemporary poetry. Wow, well done. Forthcoming publications include an edited collection, Family and Children's and Young Adults Literature. I welcome you, Eleanor, and we're going to try to take about 15 minutes for presentations.
Good stuff. All right, do slap me on the wrist if I run over. Okay, it's 20.
I'm setting a timer now.
Great. It is wonderful to be in the Zoom room with you all this evening. I know that we all wish that we could be with our colleagues at Trent, but thank you so much, all of you, for hosting this online conference and for making this happen for all of us. So yeah, I'm going to be talking about the support of working class and first generation students during COVID-19. The subtitle that came to mind for me as I was writing this last week is a quotation from G.K. Chesterton. If a thing is worth doing, it's worth doing badly. And I will come back to that later. So the concerted efforts made by St. Chad's College and by Durham University more widely during the last decade or so to attract applications from what we call low participation neighbourhoods have meant that now more than ever, we must anticipate and respond to the varied practical and pastoral needs of a more diverse student body. And furthermore, as we're all aware, painfully aware, I think, the COVID-19 pandemic drastically exacerbated the inequalities of opportunity and support that we know lead to unequal participation and success in higher education. And those of us who are involved in widening participation or widening access activities will know only too well, I think, that getting our non-traditional students through the door is only half the job done. And I would argue that actually it's the easier half. Retaining and supporting these students for the duration of their degree programme is often the more difficult challenge. And the pandemic seemed perfectly timed then, cruelly but perfectly timed, to test just how well St. Chad's College was set up to support our increased number of working class and first generation students. Now, we've always been aware that not all of our students benefit from stable family relationships and comfortable home environments. But I think that these disparities of background and experience were made unusually visible during the first UK lockdown in 2020, when students were forced to return home at very short notice. So whether it was a safe living environment, reliable internet access at home, a quiet place to study, or even a proper bed to sleep in at night, it became apparent that our most disadvantaged and vulnerable students lacked even these basic provisions during that first lockdown. Now, I need to make it clear at this point that I'm not unthinkingly assuming that a working class or first generation student lacks parental support or adequate living and working environments. We were aware of many students from economically advantaged backgrounds who were unable to live or work at home, either due to familial estrangement, parental alcoholism, or in several cases, an extremely clinically vulnerable sibling or grandparent in the family home. So whilst the title of this paper refers specifically to working class and first generation students, its scope is actually much wider, encompassing the care of all students who, for whatever reason, lacked support, connection, or resources during those early days of the pandemic. And the college, like many of your colleges, I'm sure, essentially closed its doors during the first UK lockdown from March 2020. But despite this, we always had a small number of students who remained in residence. Now, the majority of these students were international students who were simply not able to travel to their home countries. But the rest were UK students who did not have a safe place to go, or who knew that they would not have access to adequate working space at home. And we had to be very honest with these students about the fact that the closure of our catering facilities and staff furlough would mean that the college would cease to run as normal and that only a skeleton staff would remain on site. And initially we worried about a loss of staff connection with these students still in residence. But we quickly found that through a combination of weekly online catch-ups, both one-to-one and group catch-ups, And the socially distanced but in-person conversations that these students had with our porters, often at very odd times of night, we actually got to know these students far better than we would have known them in normal circumstances. And perhaps more worrying in the end were those students who had returned home to what we knew were less than ideal home environments. So this included LGBTQIA students who had to hide their sexuality or their trans status at home, or students who were dead named by family members during this time, students who had to share a bedroom with or provide childcare for multiple younger siblings, students who had to work practically full-time to ensure the survival of a family business, or support an out-of-work parent with money from their student finance allowance. We're also talking about students with mental health issues who were no longer able to meet their counsellor in person during this time, or who had to hide their prescribed medication from parents and family members who were unsympathetic or judgmental. And our support for these students at this time felt messy, and that's probably the best way to describe it. It felt reactive, and it very often felt inconsistent. We had to respond on a case-by-case basis to these students rather than relying on policy or precedent. And it was impossible to do things by the book because the book simply didn't exist anymore. Nobody ever thought that we would have to write this book. So a specific example would be financial assistance for students in financial hardship. So in my experience pre-COVID, a financial hardship application to the university's Student Support Fund could take up to 6 to 8 weeks to be processed. And obviously we were dealing with far more urgent and often completely unexpected financial shortfalls in the first few months of the pandemic. So if a student needed a laptop, we sourced a laptop. If they lacked internet access at home, we posted them a Wi-Fi dongle. If they needed a small grant for a textbook that they no longer had access to through the university library, then we made it available. If they needed to return to college in the early hours of the morning unexpectedly due to feeling unsafe at home, well then our porters quickly made up a room for them and fixed them a sandwich. Now, running our colleges during a global pandemic, and I know I'm preaching to the choir here, it was a steep learning curve, and I think it was a test of mettle for us all, because suddenly we were thrust almost overnight into a very different set of working conditions and a very different working environment. Working from home in sometimes very difficult circumstances and learning to use those online technologies that we'd never even heard of just a few weeks before. And I think with the benefit of hindsight, I can now see that the most difficult thing for me and my colleagues was to let go of the belief that things had to be perfect in order to be good enough. And you'd think that having had a baby 10 months before the pandemic started would have perhaps cleansed me of my perfectionism, but it hadn't quite happened. I think the COVID pandemic achieved that more effectively. And it brings me to that quotation from G.K. Chesterton, although actually appropriately enough for this paper this evening, it's actually a common misquotation, so I haven't even managed to get that right. And that quotation is, if a thing is worth doing, it's worth doing badly. And this brings me on to something that Anne-Marie Canning, the chief executive of the Brilliant Club, said back in 2020. Now, the Brilliant Club is a UK higher education access charity, and we've had a partnership at St Chad's College. We've had a partnership with the Brilliant Club since around 2018. And she said much the same thing in an online article that was published in May of 2020. And she counselled colleagues, our work will rightly be messier and more responsive. Constraints breed creativity. It won't be perfect, but then who says it has to be? A punk DIY ethic will see us through. We're all learning as we go. Don't let a lack of perfection paralyze action this summer. So this was a call to arms, really. Even if you can't do it well, you still have to get out and do it. And if something needed to be done in those dark months and circumstances dictated that we could not do it perfectly, well, then it still had to be done. And in most cases, it was better done badly than not at all. So a few cases in point. I can remember the online pastoral meeting with a student in distress. So I had a crying student on the end of the Zoom call, and I had a crying baby in my arms. We had a Zoom public lecture with an eminent academic. He didn't realise for a good 10 minutes that his microphone was on mute. We ended up having to call his landline to let him know. And actually, even recalling these things now is giving me some slight shivers of anxiety. But I think that these things that would have felt like very embarrassing and unprofessional missteps before the pandemic, I think we've all become a little more forgiving of each other during these years. And I think crucially, we've become a little more forgiving of ourselves as well when things don't go entirely to plan. And our initial fear that students, prospective students and external partners would judge us harshly for what felt at times like a very homespun online offering turned out to be unfounded, actually. And the opposite seemed to be true, in fact. Stakeholders seem to appreciate being able to see the more human side to college and university staff. Whether that was the authenticity of our untidy kitchens in the background before we learned to blur, or our children or four-legged friends interrupting our online open day sessions. Now, all of this was a very far cry from the increasing professionalism and, well, professionalisation, I should say, that the university has been striving for in the recent past. But it seemed to resonate with prospective students who were evidently looking for a home away from home, one that felt intimate and familial rather than glossy and corporate. And alumni and donors too seem to respond positively to this more personal, less polished style of engagement and ask. So prior to the start of the 2020-21 academic year, we reached out to alumni to ask them for financial assistance with a plan to equip every household bubble with its own communal social space. So we had at one point 26 household bubbles in our small college, each ranging between about 10 and 16 students, largely based on corridors. And we wanted these household bubbles to have their own shared social space to enable community building, even within those very small groups. So this creation of communal social space involved not only refurnishing existing spaces, but also converting a number of student bedrooms, which obviously represented a loss of income that we could scarcely afford at that stage. And whereas pre-pandemic, we likely would have prepared for a fundraising campaign like this for a number of months, this time we just sent out an email, and there were no high-res images, there was no glossy brochure, there was no committee-produced copy. It was simply just a heartfelt explanation of why we felt that we had to provide these shared communal spaces in order to preserve our famous sense of community. And we spoke very candidly about our fears as well, our fear that even if the college survived the pandemic financially, our fears that our student community, so shaped by eating and living together in close communal quarters, may never be the same. And to our surprise, the money poured in, even though a lot of people were feeling the financial strain during the early months of the pandemic. We raised £90,000 in less than 4 weeks. And that money came from a number of existing donors, but also a large number of new donors too. So this shows us that this ask, as unpolished and as homespun as it was, clearly landed with our alumni in a way that previous asks had not. And it's very much a relief now, I know that you'll all agree with me, that we don't have to be firefighting COVID-related issues on a daily basis anymore, and that we do actually have some time now to think about more long-range aims and ambitions, such as building a new college. What an exciting one. I think we're very aware now that we can, when necessary, respond and pivot quickly to meet sudden needs. We know that we can organise an all-college discussion event in response to a major breaking news story within hours, and we've done that several times. Previously, that's the kind of thing that we might have planned for weeks in advance. We're trying to ensure that we're all upskilling to build on the live streaming and video recording experience that we gained during the pandemic in order to offer hybrid in-person and online events going forward. And we're trying to retain that sense of honesty and authenticity in our engagement with alumni and donors, because we know that that works. We're moving towards a very definite story-based strategy in our engagement, one that foregrounds the experiences of individual students rather than focusing on the institution as a whole. We're now offering a choice of in-person and online student appointments, recognising the needs of students who live off campus or who may have caring responsibilities. We're trying to ensure that new students know that members of staff are as real and relatable as they are professional, even though they now probably see less of our messy kitchens on Zoom. And I think sometimes it's as simple as, swapping the blazer and heels for a jeans and jumper when you've got a full day of student pastoral appointments. And I think it comes down in the end to being willing to show your students, your prospective students and your stakeholders a level of vulnerability that we weren't prepared, that we weren't comfortable with showing before. It's okay for our students to know that we are human, we have home lives, we have responsibilities outside of the college. We're not always going to bring our A game, although we'll try. And it's important for students to see that we're not these the Nietzschean Übermensch. It's okay for staff to be real people too. So to conclude, now that we're moving out of the dark days of the pandemic to what we might call a brave new normal, I think if you visited St. Chad's today, you'd find the staff professional as always, and I hope with our signature personal touch, but I think you'll find us perhaps a little more punk than we ever thought that it was possible for us to be. And I'm going to leave it there. And I think I'm even within time. Thanks very much, everyone.
Thank you so much, Eleanor. So many things to take from that, but I may be putting on my wall, don't let a lack of perfection paralyze action. That is quite a message for sure. I think what we'll do, given the time, is that we'll move right into our next the end. So if you've got some questions or reflections that you'd like to share, if you want to jot them down, then we'll come back to it. For our next session today, we will have a presentation entitled Re-envisioning Living Learning in a Living Learning Program, Insights from COVID-19 Pandemic. So this is coming to us from three people who, we have two of them with us here today. Professor Chi-Kong Ho is one of the founding faculty members and founding head of composition at the Yong Soo To Conservatory of Music. I'm sure I've mispronounced that. National University of Singapore. As a composer, Chi-Kong has written for both Western and Chinese ensembles, which have been performed at festivals and concerts in Asia, Europe, the Americas, and Oceania. His music has been described as evocative and lyrical, distinguished by a strong power of the narrative and exotic instrumental colors, and exuding a distinct impression of Asian sounds. His other interests include cultivating university residential learning, pedagogical strategies in music composition, and cultural issues related to Asian music in modern society. Chi-Kong has served various local and international arts advisory committees, local organizations, and ministries. He's currently the YSTCM Vice Dean for Academic Programs and Quality Enhancements and the co-coordinator for Music and Society, music collaboration and production majors program. And we also have Professor Koi Cheng Lee, which I see goes by, she goes by KC here. She is the Deputy Master at Tembusu College, National University of Singapore. She has concurrent appointment with the Center for English Language Communication, where she serves as director. Her main interest is in the use of technology in English language teaching and learning in higher education. She also has a keen interest in the impact of experiential learning and living learning programs on undergraduate students in the university experience. Casey was Master of King Edward VII Hall before joining Tembusu College. A passionate educator, Casey is on the annual Teaching Excellence Honor Roll and a former member of the NUS Teaching Academy. Oh my goodness, so many people I'm excited to hear from. I'm not sure how you both want to share your time, but I'll hand it over to you both.
Thank you very much. We are tuning in at 3:30 a.m. in the morning. But it's we are glad to meet all of you. So if we are incoherent, we'll blame it on the timing. So it's a decision on whether you sleep and then wake up, or you don't sleep and sleep after this particular session. So it's Qigong. I think he hasn't slept, but I took a nap already. So maybe I'm a little bit more coherent. So we'll take note that next time if we were to attend such a conference, we'll shorten our bio data, and so that you don't have to read all that. So to help us along, we do have a set of slides, and we'll try to go through this in 15 minutes. Let me just do a share screen here. Okay, so there is a third member, but she is very fortunately on her holiday in South Korea now that we can all travel. And so it's just Chi Kong and me today to do our short presentation here. So I'm going to do a little bit of context to contextualize where we are situated, a little bit of information about NUS, National University of Singapore, as well as the residential life or model at NUS. And then Chi Kong is going to take over and to share with us some of the challenges during COVID-19. And he will also give us a snapshot of some of our responses to the challenges and the opportunities that arose out of that. And I'll come back and just give a little bit of concluding thoughts. So if people have been talking about a 3 residential model at NUS, we have a 4 residential model. Let me go through this very, very briefly. One of the oldest models is the halls of residence, and one of the oldest residence is 105 years old. So it's basically focusing very much on community building and focusing a lot out of classroom learning activities and so on and so forth. And I'm going through this chronologically at NUS. The second type of residences have light programming. So it's basically students go there, sleep, and then they have a few programs and activities that the residential colleagues put together, but not as heavy as the halls of residence. And where we come from, Tembusu College is one of the residential colleges where it has 2 components, academic component, they study, they live in the college. And the last one, which is the new kid on the block, they are called the theme houses, where they go by a certain theme. So all in all, in NUS, there are 13,000 beds. So we go by beds. Some of the rooms have got double bed capacity, and during the COVID pandemic, the capacity was reduced from 100% to 80%. So that's the context. And so at the residential, I'm now zooming in on residential colleges where we come from. Students come in for a 2-year program. So it's a year 1 and year 2 experience. And as you can see on the left-hand side, there are 4 quadrants. There are the academic programs, which are formal modules that count towards their graduation. There's also a very heavy component of out-of-classroom learning. There are field trips, dialogues, workshops, symposia, and so on and so forth. There's the residential component, as well as co-curricular sports, performing arts, community service, community engagement, so on and so forth. So that's Tembusu College is one of the 4 colleges at NUS. So to give you an idea about the academic program, it forms the modules that the students take. They need to take 4 modules, and the 4 modules form the general education curriculum of the university. There are 6 pillars of general education curriculum. In the general education curriculum, they do 4 of them at the college. And of course, they do read other modules at their own respective faculties. And the team supporting the residential colleges at each college, we have a rector, we have a master, and it's just so coincidental that Tembusu College has 2, my master who is Chi Kong, and I'm the deputy master. And we're supported by a teaching team that has a director of studies, as well as teaching fellows, residential team that has got a director of student and residential life. We also have a coordinator of residential life, 5 residential fellows, as we have 5 houses, and as well as residence assistants and an administrative team. So there are 600 residents in our college. 250 of them are in year 1, 250 of them are in year 2, and the rest of them are a combination of year 3, 4, as well as exchange students. So now that I've given you a bit of context of the residential college that we come from, I'm going to pass the time over to Chi Kong to share with us some of the challenges during the pandemic and how we try to address them more concretely. Over to you, Chi Kong.
Thanks, Casey. Hi, good afternoon, good morning, good afternoon to everyone. Thank you for this opportunity to share a little bit about what we do here in Singapore, which is not very different from what many of you have experienced also at your own campuses. I share Eleanor's thought about being messy. We are really messy as well. When we first started out with this, trying to manage the pandemic and trying to understand the effects of what it does. And I have a very simple infograph here, and I'll show you a few more infographics as we go along that actually kind of charts how we were dealing with this pandemic. One of the things that that came about during the start of the pandemic was that we weren't sure how viral the virus can be, and then we are not sure how fast it kind of like spread from one person to the other. But just to have some kind of background information, we went through something like this during the SARS period in 2003. And during the H1N1 pandemic, we went through a little bit of that also. So in a sense, we were quite prepared in a way, to manage the pandemic. But the speed at which this infection actually spreads from one person to the next was too quick for us to react. And so there are quite a number of things that were taken into decision to protect the health and well-being of the students, especially for those who are living on campuses. And so one of the things we tried to do was to limit them to certain areas. There are no crossover of zones. We zone them, and a bunch of stringent safety measures that we put in place. So one of those safety measures are things that we move lessons online. And this is suddenly when the teachers and students have to adjust, getting to have the equipment, the right kind of materials to be able to continue with the lessons, even though it is being conducted in a very different way. So normally some lessons, especially in the college, the residential college, they're conducted in seminar style. And so the students usually gather in a room and then they have a discussion and then they have lots of interaction. But as you can see in this infograph, this is actually a kind of a layout of a seminar room where we limit each table to 4 students. They had to be apart, 1 meter apart. They had to be like 2 meters from table to table. And so while we typically have something like 20 to 25 students in a classroom, all of a sudden, if we had to have safe enough to have a kind of a live face-to-face lesson, we are down to 16 persons in the classroom, which is quite an adjustment. And there are a couple of other kind of things that went along with this kind of hybrid online and face-to-face classes. There are some cases where the classes are a little larger and there's not enough space in the venue to accommodate all the students, then we have to go online. But for those students who are actually in the same classroom, there is this constant fear, right? Starting from the beginning, that they weren't sure how maybe someone, their friend, or maybe it's a person sitting next to them, might be infected by COVID and might be passing this over to them. And so while they are trying to concentrate in the classroom, there's also this fear of being infected. And that was the early days before we knew much about the virus, and then following that with sufficient vaccination to kind of calm everyone down and get them to be a little bit more normal, or the new normal. And so as you can see on this slide, we went through a couple of I won't say a couple, I would say we went through a slew of measures to ensure that everyone is safe enough to come to classroom, or at least to be safe enough to be able to teach in the classroom. And some of these, as you can see on slide, we have measures such as moving lessons online. Well, dining experience is going to be another interesting narrative, which I can show you later on, where students need to dine alone. They have to take the food from the dining hall and then bringing that back to their rooms to eat alone. And a lot of activities have to be moved online. And so, as you all know, I think most of us who are in the residential colleges who deal with living and hostels, a lot of students enjoy the kind of experiential learning that they find living in colleges or living in learned communities. And all this has to be curtailed or even cut because of the uncertainties that surround this pandemic. While we are actually asking everyone to be safe, we can't be sure that everyone will follow safety measures. And we have to kind of put forth penalties, which is not something that we really like to do, but we have to kind of ensure that these penalties would make sense to some students who do not observe any of these safety measures. As you can see, those who are staying in the residential colleges, if they break certain kind of safety measures, they will be penalized and they have demerit points, or they will have their housing privileges withdrawn. And I guess all of us face the same thing. How long is this cycle? How long will this pandemic last? Maybe it would be something like SARS. It came about summer, and then after that, by the time late fall came about, it was going away and things were getting back to normal. But it didn't. So this was long drawn, and I think this is almost a kind of a 2 years plus kind of a situation for all of us. So faced with that, then what becomes of living in a living learning environment, right? And that's the question that we ask ourselves all the time. Maybe Casey, we can go on to the next slide. Yeah. Okay, let me show you a little bit previous slide, Casey, just to show you a little bit about the zones. And so this is what we had to resort to. We have like a zone A, zone B, C, D. I mean, we're just talking about a block of residential building, right? And then these zones have to be kind of distributed between floors. And so students are only allowed to interact within the zone that they are assigned to. they can't go on to the next zone. And so that we are hoping to isolate. And if let's say any of them actually came into the close contact, we would know where the spread of the virus comes from, and we are able to contain them. Now, students being students, I mean, this is not to even mention about us, right? You know, we really don't like to be, you know, told what we can do and what we can't do, you know, and this really affects them a lot, especially when they are young adults, you know, and one of the reasons why they come to college to stay is so that they won't need to be home, you know, listening to their parents. But unfortunately over here, we are more than acting as parents, we are kind of enforcers as well. And so that itself is a kind of an expectation that the students didn't expect to face in this pandemic. And it is not easy for them to adapt. And it took quite a bit of time for them to finally understand that, yeah, we need to do this as a community. And we need to kind of like chip in and understand that this helps everyone. Maybe we can go on to the next slide. I'm going to go on a little bit quicker here on. So one of the things we tried to do when we first, once we understood how this pandemic actually, or this COVID-19 actually works, one of the things that we put in place was insisting that everyone has to have their mask on. That's the least you can do to kind of like prevent spread. And other things that we have, like we created applications on the phone that actually captures a close contact, close proximity, and so that if anything should happen at any time of the day or at whichever date, they will be able to kind of like track, you know, who are your close contacts, so that we can kind of minimize the spread. It sounds like a kind of a police state. I think George Orwell would have been proud of us, but unfortunately, that's the kind of things that we need to do in order to be able to track the movements. And so some of these things are in place so that we hope that students can continue with some of the normal activities despite all these measures. One of those challenges we are hoping to deal with was those classes or courses that have field trips. That didn't happen, you know, it's totally out of the window. But we have to find alternatives. And still students who does like field trips to Cambodia or the neighboring countries, that didn't happen. Students who are reaching out to the secondary school or high school as mentors, that didn't happen. So a lot of these kind of experiences, students were not able to do, and even with, you know, the kind of measures that we have in place, they are still confined to a particular place, which is the college itself. Let's move on to the next one.
Just letting you know, Qigong, we have a couple minutes left so that we can get in the next one. Thank you.
Yeah. And so part of this is actually to kind of adjust, you know, to how much we can actually teach the students and how our teachers can adjust and can manage the situation. As you can see over here, there are so many things that the government, the Ministry of Health and the Ministry of Education tells us that what we need to do in order to kind of keep ourselves safe, that we decided to create infographics to make it easier for students to understand and to kind of take note of what to follow. And so these are some of the measures, like for example, in our multi-purpose halls, we have a certain number of students who can be allowed inside there. And then we have key reminders what they need to do, whether they maintain their hygiene or whether they are kind of social distancing. All this need to be reminded. The next slide, please. And so we have to kind of sustain students and community kind of engagement, even though we cannot meet in person. There's all kinds of issues that comes from isolation and being confined to a particular space. There's emotional and mental wellness issues that we have to deal with, which all of a sudden kind of surface quicker than what we usually expect or seen before. And so there's always constant meetings and gathering of teachers to manage students and find out who are the ones who are vulnerable and how we can help them. And many of these things actually thanks to the teachers and their courage, they're able to kind of keep up with the students and help to get them to manage some of their emotion and wellness issues. The next one. Next slide, please. And so this is the narrative. I think you appreciate how sad it can be. The previous slide, Casey. We started in August 2021, where we started to chart out. You can see the zones on the slide on the infographic on the left. And then when we knew a little bit better about the pandemic, and we are able to kind of open up more, and then we allow for 5 students to a table in the dining hall. Next slide, please. And then the pandemic got worse. And then we have to kind of like cut it down to only 2 persons per table in the dining hall. Yeah, I can see your expressions. It's really awful. And then it got better, and then we move on to 5 persons to a table again, and then the students are a little bit happier. And then moving on where we were last at. Next slide, please, Casey. We were allowed 10 persons to a dining table, and the students became happier, a lot happier. You know, they have this interaction and the kind of the sense of normalcy that they missed, you know, pre-COVID. And so you can see from the left infographic where we started off from zoning, you know, restricting them to these numbers and places, to a kind of a free 10 persons to a table. Moving on. We have to kind of reinvent ourselves, as I mentioned along the way. We have to buy new equipment. We have to kind of change some of the classrooms, fit it with hybrid capabilities, cameras, managing for some of these students. It's not easy because they don't have the equipment. And then we have to kind of like react very quickly, have to respond quite quickly to situations, especially when there is a close contact case in the classroom. What do we do? The students can come to class, and we have to switch to a hybrid model, and so that they have at least to be able to kind of attend the classes itself. And that put a lot of strain on the teachers. But thanks to the teachers, they have been pretty impressive because they were able to kind of manage, cope. I think the teachers themselves would need some counseling also, you know, because of the kind of stress that they face, you know, preparing their lessons and trying to manage the pandemic situation at the same time. The next slide, please. And so I'm going to pass this back to Casey to wrap up how we're going to move forward after handling with all these situations. And thank you for your time.
You're going to tell us that we run out of time. So I think we're just going to end that by saying that you get a sense of the uncertainties and the roller coaster that we've all gone through. But I think what we've learned is basically that, you know, all this with a lot of communication, a lot of community building activities, as well as all working together. We'll get through it together. Yeah, I'm just going to end it there. Christine, sorry that we ran out of time.
Oh, thank you so much. You know, it's not 15 minutes goes by so quickly, especially all of us, which I'm sure we could be very happy speaking for hours and hours. I think what I just want to say, what struck me is, even though the pace of the pandemic for all of us followed a slightly different pattern, I think we all shared in that constantly changing information, constantly changing situation, and having to adapt all the time, and how difficult that was for our students as well as for us and all of the faculty. We have one more presenter, and then we may go a bit into our 4 o'clock time, and that's fine. We have a little flexibility there, and then hopefully lots of opportunities for people to chat as they wish in the breakout groups at our next session. So the next presentation is Changing Cultures for Our Changing World from Katrina Clifford. Katrina is an experienced college dean and tertiary educator, currently working as the Dean of Academics at Robert Menzies College. She is motivated by a desire to see young women flourish and grow and to raise up a generation of young women who are formed by strong training and support and equipped to change the world for the good of others. Katrina has her bachelor's, master's, and PhD in English literature from the University of Sydney. She has presented a number of papers regarding colleges and on English literature. And I'm just thrilled to hear this next presentation. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Christine. I am coming to you from Sydney, Australia, where it is just before 6 a.m. And I'm just going to try and share my screen if I can do that. This is one of those things that is easier to do when it's, you know, not first thing in the morning. Is that coming up for people?
Yes,
yes, excellent. Okay, so my paper is a little bit different to the two that have gone before, which are very much focused on COVID and the particular challenges of the pandemic. My paper is more on an ongoing issue that hasn't gone away despite the pandemic, although has shifted slightly, and that's the challenges of sexual harassment and sexual assault in university colleges. So you will all be aware that The Hunting Ground was a movie that was released in 2015 that really drew attention to this issue. And I'd be very surprised if anybody in this conference had not had students disclose experiences of sexual harassment and sexual assault to them. Here in Australia, we modified the original Hunting Ground movie to a shorter version that was specifically tailored to the Australian university market, and actually shared the movie in kind of discussion forums on campuses. And this sparked a real desire for us to have more of a sense of how these issues were playing out in Australia. And so Universities Australia, which is our kind of governing body, commissioned a survey which was conducted by the Australian Human Rights Commission, released results in 2017, which found that 1 in 5 students had been sexually harassed in a university setting in 2016, and 1.6% of students had been sexually assaulted in the university setting in 2015 or 2016. These are horrible, horrifying statistics, and particularly when you note that 10% of those sexual assaults occurred at a university residence or college. This was clearly a big problem for us. This survey was redone, although in a slightly different format during the pandemic, and it's been interesting to see how the numbers have changed. Rates of sexual assault on university campuses and sexual harassment on campus have lowered because people just haven't been here, but rates of sexual harassment online have obviously increased. So the problem is still there. It's taken a slightly different form in the last couple of years, but it's still a problem that we need to be dealing with. So these results came out. One of the recommendations from the 2017 Human Rights Commission survey was that university residences conduct their own independent reviews of their culture to work out what particularly was happening within their residence and how to deal with it. So we all sprang into gear. In the following 2 years, many colleges did in fact commission their own reports, and review after review concluded that many colleges had problematic cultures that did little to create safe environments for young women. And one recommendation that came up over and over again was to be proactive in appointing young female leaders in colleges to student associations and positions of authority within college communities. This would, the reports claimed, lead to greater equality between male and female student populations, and the greater equality would lead to better relationships and more equitable treatment of previously underrepresented groups. This is a picture of my residential advisors from last year. They're a lovely bunch. I just needed a placeholder for this slide, and I thought you can see my students because it's a face to what we're doing here. Increasing rates of female leadership within University colleges is a great idea, I think, but it's a big ask for young women. We're effectively saying to these young people, our culture needs changing and it's your job to fix it. So go and have fun. And at 19, 20, even 21 years of age, they may have the enthusiasm for this task, but they rarely have the skills or the resilience to actually follow through with it. So I've wanted to do something about this for a long time, and this year, thanks to a fellowship from an organisation here in Sydney called Anglican Deaconess Ministries, I had the opportunity to do so. So I'm writing a training program for young women in leadership positions in university colleges. My aims are to give them a better understanding of what leadership is, to develop some leadership skills and capacities in them, and to support them and get them to support each other as they take on these leadership roles. My hope is that this course will help them survive and thrive in their roles in colleges, and also equip them to take on leadership roles in the future in their workplaces, homes, and communities. I'm using this book as a basis for the course that I am writing. So it's called Lead, Develop, Care by a guy called Terry Cook, who's based in the States. And he has developed this model of leadership that involves these three different types of leadership, important things in leadership. So firstly, to lead, which he defines as intentionally influencing and enabling people to accomplish a given task. That's kind of our broad understanding of what leadership is, isn't it? Influencing and enabling people for a that needs to be accomplished. He has these other two elements as well. So secondly, to develop, which means intentionally strengthening people's capacity to grow and contribute. And thirdly, care, intentionally watching over and responding to people's needs and well-being. I think this model works really nicely in a college context. We can all see the need for leadership, particularly when change is what we desire. We need student leaders who can see a better future, motivate others to pursue it, and get everyone on the same page. But colleges are also places where we want to care for our residents, and we want our student leaders, whether they be part of the pastoral care team or not, to be part of that. And if we are to develop cultures that overcome the culture of sexual assault and harassment that all these reports have been picking up, we need to grow cultures where care is an important part of everything that we do. And we need our student leaders to be thinking about how they can invest in and grow the next generation of student leaders, because our turnover is necessarily high. Students will often only be in a leadership position for a year or sometimes two before they graduate and move out. So that develop part of the piece is really key to a university college, I think. This model is also, I think, particularly helpful in training female student leaders. Many studies have demonstrated how women are often punished for the types of ambition, confidence, and forwardness that rewards men. And women are often expected to take on roles that involve higher levels of care or investment in people rather than ideas. The Lead, Develop, Care model of leadership demonstrates that leadership is not only about direction setting or charisma or being seen to be in charge. It necessarily involves those more feminine aspects of care and teaching and relationship. I think if we can help young women see that the ways they've been culturally trained to behave can actually benefit them as leaders, they will hopefully develop greater confidence in their own abilities to lead and step into leadership roles more willingly. But once they're there, they'll need the skills to do the job well. So here's a very brief overview of the course that I'm writing. There are going to be 8 separate modules to it, covering the following things. So the first, what is leadership, and introducing this idea of the Lead, Develop, Care module. Second, a focus on leadership skills, particularly communication skills and strategy, big picture thinking. Leadership skills in terms of relationships. How do you relate to people in authority above you? How do you relate to people you are leading? How do you relate to a team? How do you find mentors and allies and coaches? And how do you network effectively? What are your particular leadership strengths? So I'm going to use the Gallup-Clifton Strengths Finder model to help students think about where are they particularly strong and how can they use their strengths in their particular role. Self-care for leaders, because we all know that leadership is difficult. We've seen that particularly during the pandemic, I think, and getting young people to learn how to care for themselves well early on in their leadership journey is really key to long-term efficiency and efficacy in leadership. What are some barriers for women in leadership? What are the things that these women, young women, whether they come across them in their college context or not, will certainly face in the future as they step into further leadership roles? From kind of little things like being interrupted or not being given credit for their ideas, to the broader issues of sexism and harassment in the workplace. Some questions about ethical leadership. What does it mean to be ethical as a leader in terms of being a person of integrity and authenticity? How honesty is important in a leader, financial integrity, those sorts of things. And then finally, because a big part of this is this idea of cultural change. How do we do that? How do we do change management in leadership roles? How do we set a vision that is different for what has happened before? And how do we get people alongside our vision and take them with us? So that's the kind of very brief overview of what I'm aiming to do. And then there's a few different delivery options. So my course is aimed at young women. So this is not a course for young men, but anyone who identifies as female is welcome to participate in this. The idea behind that is young men get plenty of leadership encouragement and leadership investment, and young women tend not to. But they'll also talk differently about what it means to be a woman in leadership if it's a group of just women who are having a similar sort of experience, to if it's a mixed group where young men, we know from all of the research, will tend to dominate the discussion. So I've got a few different ways that I want to deliver the course. It can be done in person or it can be done virtually. We've all gotten very good at virtual delivery of all sorts of things. And particularly if I'm in Australia and you're in Canada, you probably are not going to fly me over to deliver my course. So I can do it virtually if that's a problem of distance. It can be run by me, it can be run by a member of college staff who I give material to and set them up to run it, or it can be self-run by students. So I'm planning to record videos and audio files and give people written material that they can work through as a group. It can be done as all 8 modules or as a smaller selection that can choose, okay, like number 1 and number 3 and number 7. So let's just have those ones. They will all interact with each other. And obviously for the best experience, you want the whole thing, but it will work. The modules will work independently as well, depending on the needs of the college. Ideally, you'd run it as kind of weekly or fortnightly workshops with people having time in between the modules to reflect on what has been said, do a little bit of homework, do some more reflective activities, and then come back to talk about it. But you could also do it as, you know, a kind of 2-day intensive course, more like a conference, where you kind of come in, do a session, have a break, come back and do another session, and just kind of get bombarded by different ideas. The idea of the modules is not that I'm just going to talk at people, although I'm just talking at you, I realize it's a time management issue, but to have lots of interactive activities, lots of opportunities for discussion, questions, and sharing of their experiences, and particularly relating of the content of the course to their particular college contexts. And then I'm hoping that we will set them up to continue to meet up together and look after each other and support each other beyond the end of the course. So I'm keen to have fairly small groups that are being trained together. I think you could do it with as few as 6, probably up to about 20. And Lean In, which is Sheryl Sandberg's organisation, does this thing where they encourage women to form circles in their network. So either their workplace or the place where they live or their school or the university, they call them Lean In circles. And so building on that sort of idea of hers, of using the course partly as a way to connect these young women together, so that when I leave or the course finishes, they have this newly formed network of other young women with leadership ambitions who are keen to support each other and continue to invest in each other as they move into positions of leadership in their college, but also out of college and into the world more generally. So I'm still very much in the early stages of this project. I really love feedback. If you've got any thoughts on what I have said very quickly here on both content and delivery, And if you're interested in utilising some of my training material at some point once I've finished writing it, and have ideas on how that may work in your college context, I'd love to speak with you. So it's my email address right there. It's my phone number, which, note is in Australia. So, don't call me at 3 p.m. your time because I will be asleep. But I would really love to connect with you. So thank you for listening. My apologies for speaking very quickly. Let me try and get rid of this. There we go. Thanks.
Thank you so much. So many ideas. I think many of us may be reaching out to you. We'll want an update on how your course is going and what you're able to provide. I think when you spoke at the beginning around challenges for women and the kinds of sexual assaults and such that we see, certainly we saw as students went home that they were sometimes going to unsafe places at home. And that it kind of ties back again with what Eleanor was speaking about in the challenges, of each student's. And I think what we're all seeing is we are dealing with that challenge that, every student's situation is unique. And that we can certainly see themes and threads, but part of our challenge in the colleges is supporting each student where they are and helping them in the best way that we can. And that means it's messy and complicated, for sure. I know I would love to open it up. I feel like we could fill another hour with conversation. But Jessica, you're going to tell me, I think that we have other things that we need to move on. So I invite you, I hope to use the what I'm calling Whova platform to reach out to our speakers, chat. I know we can't do that as well in this setting, but please reach out. There's a messaging system. You can use that to send questions or comments or have a chat. And I believe that Cassie or Ty actually created discussion groups for each of the sessions, if I recall correctly. So lots of opportunity there to continue this conversation. Thank you, everybody.